there seems to be no end to Donald Trump's tirade against India. First, remember, he slapped a 25% tariff on India. He now says he will substantially raise those tariffs even further because India continues to buy Russian oil. Now, in a social media post, he said India is not only buying large amounts of Russian oil, it's also selling it in the open market for a profit. They don't care about how many people in Ukraine are being killed, and because of this, I will substantially raise the tariff paid by India. He's also, this as of Tuesday morning in the US, Tuesday night for us, said that India is not being a very good trade partner, and he will substantially increase the 25% currently being paid by India in the next 24 hours. So what is really going on? Why is Trump reacting in this manner, and how is it likely to affect Indian business people? That's the video that we're currently looking at. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and if you can support us financially, please do so. Now, to understand what is happening, we have to step back a little bit. You remember when Trump was campaigning to be president, he had promised he would end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. After returning to power in January, he realized it might not be that easy. Russia is still bombing Ukrainian cities, Ukraine is still losing territory, and peace talks are nowhere in sight. Now, Trump moved up his ultimatum to Russia. He called for more sanctions. He called for secondary tariffs on countries doing trade with Russia on oil, mainly China and India. So far, the promises, the threats, the cajoling from Trump has failed to shift the Kremlin's position, and the stubborn diplomatic stalemate continues as is. Now, do the sanctions work? Have they made any dent so far? Ukraine seems to think that the sanctions are making a dent on Russia, and Ukraine is asking the countries in the West to go even harder. The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Monday urged US, Europe, and other nations to impose even stronger sanctions on Moscow's energy, trade, and banking sectors, and even secondary sanctions. Now, on Sunday, Trump had said that Russia had proven to be pretty good at avoiding sanctions, and they are wily characters, he said, of Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin insisted that international sanctions imposed since its February 2022 invasion has had little or no impact at all. The secondary sanctions also complicate Washington's relationship with China and with India, who stand accused of helping Russia finance the war effort by buying oil from Russia. So in Trump's latest accusation of India buying massive amounts of Russian oil and selling it for profits, let's take a look at those accusations. Now, the 4th of August, a fresh threat came from Donald Trump, where he said he will substantially increase US tariffs on India because we're buying oil. Last week, he had already slapped a 25% duty on India, and he said that he would announce a penalty for buying Russian oil and military equipment, not to mention the notification. Now, he's gone on to say, of course, that India doesn't care what's happening in Ukraine, but the Indian government has said repeatedly that we do care for peace. In his reaction, India has said it will take all necessary steps to safeguard and promote national interest, and the implication of the tariffs are being examined as we speak. Let's take a look at how much oil India buys from Russia, right? So India historically has bought most of its crude oil from the Middle East. Now remember, we refine oil, crude oil in India in large amounts, and make petroleum and diesel and all of the other products, LPG, CNG, but we don't have crude oil deposits in India. So we used to buy it from the Middle East, from Iraq, from Saudi, but things changed when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Before the war started, India bought very little oil from Russia. 0.2% of our total import came from Russia. Today, Russia accounts to 35 to 40% of India's total crude oil import. And in July alone, Russia supplied 36% of all of India's imports. Now, India has said this is also happening because when Europe brought sanctions against Russia, it started diverting oil from the Middle East to Europe, because Europe up till then was buying oil from Russia. And so India then had to find other sources. Now, that makes India the second largest buyer of Russian oil right now after China. This is because of the sanctions that Europe brought in, Russian oil became cheap, and India needed it to keep fuel prices stable for its own citizens. Remember, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar back in 2022, when he was questioned about this, he said, our total oil purchase from Russia in a month is less than what Europe does in one afternoon. That statement is not true anymore because we've increased that purchase and Europe has decreased it. But India still argues that we import because we need to give energy security to our citizens, and it's not geopolitical, and it's not us making a statement in support of Russia. Let's take a look at that second part of the accusation that Trump has brought against India, which is buying Russian weapons. In reality, though, India has actually steadily reduced the defense dependence on Moscow. So back in 2009, 76% of India's arms came from Russia. In 2024, as of last year, that number has dropped to 36%. India has been increasing its business with US and with France and building its own. And since 2018, India has signed $20 billion worth of deals with US American defense companies to buy drones and aircraft and cutting edge technology. So to say that India is buying weaponry from Russia is actually not a fair statement at all. Let's take a look at the numbers of trade right now and where that will hurt us. So in 2024-25, US bilateral trade, which is the business that went back and forth between India and US, was $186 billion, of which India exports $86 billion worth of goods and we import $45 billion. So there's a deficit of $44 billion, which makes the US unhappy. And that is where the tariffs will hurt. A 25% duty on textiles, gems, auto parts coming out of India. Luckily, pharma stays out of it. And this comes while both countries are still negotiating their bilateral trade agreement. To give you an idea of what it is we're exporting, our main export, about $8 billion a year, is pharmaceuticals. That stays out of this net. Other than that, telecom instruments, gems and jewelry, petroleum products, vehicles and auto components, precious jewelry, ready-made garments and products of iron and steel is what we mostly tend to export to the US. Now, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller was giving an interview to Fox News. He's one of Trump's close colleagues. He has said that it is, and I'm quoting, not acceptable for India to continue financing Russia's war by buying oil. People will be shocked to learn that India basically is tied with China in purchasing Russian oil. And he said India portrays itself as being one of our closest friends. They don't accept our products. They impose massive tariffs on us, and we know that they engage in a lot of cheating on immigration. Of course, we're seeing again the purchase of oil, Miller said. Now, Miller is very close to Trump. He's a close aide, and so we should take this seriously. Now, specifically about the cheating on immigration, now we've had various conversations about this, but there's a latest development in the visa argument. Trump has rolled out a new visa bond scheme. So certain foreigners, and we don't know which ones, when they apply for a US tourist or a business visa, so B1 and B2, they may be asked to deposit a bond of $15,000 as security to prevent them from basically overstaying their visa. This is a pilot program that will start in August and apparently run till August next year. While the countries that will be affected by this has not been announced yet, if Trump continues to be upset with India, is there a possibility that he will use this against India, and will that hit tourism, business travel, people visiting families, and the large basically diaspora that we have living in the US who are Indians who travel back and forth, or who have families traveling back and forth. Now, for the first time, India has mounted a very clear counterattack. Our Ministry of External Affairs has put out a statement. It has said that EU's trade with Russia was 67.5 billion euros in goods and 17 billion in services, far higher than India's. So Europe is actually showing a double standard here, because it's doing far greater business with Russia, and the United States continues to import critical materials from Russia. So why single out India? And India's position repeatedly has been very clear. It says, and I'm quoting, our imports are compelled by energy security. We will take all necessary steps to safeguard national interests. So basically, our citizens, our 1.4 billion citizens, need to have access to fuel that is affordable in order to run their homes, in order to travel, in order to do their work. And India will continue under all circumstances to make sure that our citizens get access to fuel. Now, there's a separate argument to be made about how much tax we're paying on fuel in India, but that's a domestic issue, and this is a geopolitical issue, and this is what we should focus on. Now, what India is saying very clearly is that it is being targeted by the US and by Europe for importing oil from Russia, whereas all Western countries are still doing business with Russia, and it seems to be a double standard against India. fundamentally where we're standing right now, Trump is using tariffs as a political weapon. He is using it to sort of get Russia to agree to a ceasefire, to put pressure on India and China to stop doing business with Russia. But India is standing its ground as far as Russian oil is concerned. The fallout of what is happening, and remember the deadline that US has given Russia will expire in the week's time. So we'll know really how all of this is going to play out. And the fallout of this could not just change Indian and US relations, but global trade and global diplomacy. Since Trump has taken office, he's changed the way countries deal with each other. He's changed the rules of diplomacy in general. And so the coming weeks will be crucial to see how the Kremlin responds to Trump, and as a result, what impact will it have on India and US's relationship at the negotiation table, especially when that trade deal is still in conversation, whether that is going to change anything at all. But for now, for Indian businessmen specifically in sectors like garments, in sectors like gems and jewelry, their clients overseas, we understand, are asking them to pay that actual tariff, saying, pay us the tariff and cover it from your end, because this is US on India. And so it is hurting business quite drastically. And these are large businesses, garments particularly, that employ a large number of people across the country. They're labor intensive. So it supports a large number of jobs as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Leave me a comment in the comment section. Whether you believe, India's stand on Russia and Russian oil is the right one at this point, and how you think this is going to play out.